Good morning, friends. I come from a region which is considered by the Planning Commission as one of the most backward regions. And they had a list of districts, 100 most backward districts, and I come from one of those districts. The poverty is such that things became even worse with conflict and all of those problems. And it was in this context that we began to, as a young person then, some 25 odd years earlier, began to question if values such as hard work or sincerity or integrity really matter, in a place where there's so much of conflict. But one of the things that I learned here was in a place where governments don't function, and in a place where there is a parallel government, which is even more stronger, you begin to wonder, your own destiny. You begin to wonder and begin to even question your role altogether. And so these were the questions as a young person when we started to work and begin our social entrepreneurial work out there. Because in a place like Nagaland, it's like to open any enterprise is like trying to open up a restaurant in a desert area. And that was the context in which we worked. So when we began to work, one of the things, major lessons that I learned was in the strength of the community. So one of the things that we started working was sitting with them, working with them. One of the instances in one of the places where in a cluster of around 9 villages, 40 children died. The community got together, the government isn't there because the government is almost non-functional, and you have insurgency on the other hand. And so we had to tell the community that, we have to stand on our own because that's the only strength that you have. And so the community got together and we began to do our own things. And anyone can challenge me. I can tell you that we run a primary health center. We began with one primary health center where the doctors, nurses, the lab technician, even the ambulance driver, the cook, you name it, the doctor, you name it, is appointed by the villagers themselves, and the government does the payment. So this became a movement in itself. Across the country, you will not find a primary health center. In fact, when I go back this time back home, there will be an interview board where all the villagers will be there, and the doctors are coming for the interview, and it's the villagers who are going to appoint the doctor. And the salary would come from the government. And I think that became the hope for us, that communities can, rally around and really work. And today I'm proud to say that we have a cluster of primary health centers which are owned by communities, which are run by the community, across 2 districts, which started off just as a cluster of 8 villages. Every day in around 450 schools, midday meals are being served. And the list goes on. In fact, there's a village which is tied up with a company to run a 22 megawatt power project. There's another primary health center which is planning on an air ambulance to come. And so I began to realize that if we can give ownership to communities, then the communities can really stand on their own. And this is one of the lessons that I learned, that even if it's a backward area, even if it's a conflict zone, if communities are given the baton and if they're given ownership, then they can actually do wonders. The other thing, as a young person, does hard work really count? And when we were trying to do all of these good work, so-called good work, because we wanted to see that justice happen, we also had to brush the government the wrong way, or the insurgent groups the wrong way. One day I got an envelope. There was a note in it, and there was a .22 caliber bullet. And the note said, "Chingmak, you better stop your work." Some of our work was against drug trafficking. And some of the work that we did were things against the government. And since I was young, I wasn't scared at all. I was rather very angry. The question in my mind was, when I'm trying to do something good, why should someone ask me to stop? Or, put a bullet to threaten me not to do the work that I wanted to do? And these were questions which went into my mind. 2 days later, it was late in the evening, and because of conflict, things start early and things shut down very early. By 4, most of the shops close down. And so 9 o'clock is really late in the night. And there was this phone call which came. And my wife tells me, wait, it must be those guys who send you the bullet. And I went and picked up that phone. And the person on the other side of the phone said, this is from the Raj Bhavan. And I said, okay, what can I do for you? And that person says, Abdul Kalam, the President of India, would like to meet you. And I was like, wow, I'm just 2 hours from Burma. How did Abdul Kalam come to know me? But one of the lessons that I learned was hard work really matter. If you really do hard work, it gets noticed. On one hand, you have the bullet coming. On the other hand, you have a phone call saying that the president would like to meet you. And so that really gave me hope that, hard work really matters. The other thing I also learned in my career, and when I say my career as a social entrepreneur, it's about anything. It may be your teaching work, it may be your business, it may be whatever enterprise that you're into. One of the things that I learned was if you're trying to create awareness, then your services should also tally. You just can't have awareness and don't tally with your services. So we started work among drug users, and HIV became a major issue. And so one of the things that we did was we were so remote. When I tell you I'm remote, conflict in itself is a nightmare. Conflict in itself is a bad dream. The other day, my friend calls me up from Manali and he says, Chingmak, how are you? I said, I'm fine. And he again repeated, are you okay? And so I said, yes, I'm alive. So that's the kind of context that I live in, But even despite that, we ensured that the CD4 count machine was there for HIV positive people. We ensured that the viral load machine is around 8 crore rupees. We made sure that the viral load machine was there. Antiretroviral medication for HIV positive people are around about 18,000 rupees a month, which a poor person will never be able to afford. But we made sure that it was available. You know what happened one afternoon? This is the other thing, that if you work hard, and if you really are good at what you do, and if you're really professional at what you do, and made sure that all the holes are plugged, and you're really good at what you're doing, it really works. Because, one afternoon, it was breezy, windy, and it, closed the main door to my office. So I go to open the main door so that, the light could come in. And there was this guy who was wearing a long trench coat. He had a cowboy hat, and he walks into, and he slams the door and comes into my room. He pulls the chair across, he sits on it, and he says, are you Mr. Chingmak? And I said, I'm Chingmak. He said, bring me the doctor. And later on, 2 of his bodyguards come in, and this man says, I need the doctor. I'm HIV. And I'm told that you provide services here, you provide medication here, you provide all of the services, and I want it. So I picked up my intercom and called some of my colleagues to see if the nurse is around so that we could take the blood for his blood count and things like that. And he looks into my eyes, and you know what this man says? Do you know me? And I said, I don't know you. And this person says, I'm the person who sent you that envelope. And I was like, wow. And he said, I'm very sorry for what I did. So this is one thing that, it's a hope that, keeps on pushing me, that hard work matters, integrity matters. And genuine concern really matters, When you do what has to be done, if you're first to come in, and if you're last to walk out, and ensure that you stand by what you have to do with your friends or with your colleagues or with your calling or whatever services you're in, if we are sincere in whatever we do, that gets counted. So one of the things I learned also was when your heart is involved, then it is always respected, in whatever you do. If your heart is genuinely engaged in that process, it really is always respected. Back in the day, in the early 90s, when things were really bad in our place in Nagaland, our streets would be like virtual battlefield. There would be firing happening, and everyone would be running around, bullets flying around. And in one of those instances, suddenly in the afternoon around 2 o'clock, there was this firing happening. The only room, up in the hills, we have houses made of wooden planks only. So the only place which had a concrete wall was the toilet, the bathroom. So I pushed all my kids into the bathroom, locked them from outside, and I went out to, close the main door. And as I was closing the main door, a person with heavy knapsack, he had an AK-47, barged into the door. And so I quickly closed the door because I thought he was looking for refuge. Maybe he was trying to run away. It was either the insurgent groups or the army, or sometimes it was within the insurgent groups. There were so many factions within the insurgent groups. It was either between them or between the army. You never knew. So you had to save anyone who walked into your door. And so I closed the door. He walks into my kitchen. He puts his hand into his pocket, and he takes out a 2,000 rupee, and he says, "Take this. My commander says, thank you for all your good work." And in the midst of all the firing which is happening, all the bullets firing around, here's this guy, with his AK-47, he was shivering, and then he gave me the 2,000 rupees into my hand, and he just rushes through the back door into the firing zone again, And these were moments which really made me realize that, if your heart is real, if you mean business, if you're genuine, then it really matters. But this is something sad about conflict. Most of you are young people here, so I'm not very sure if you would know someone by the name Sanjoy Ghosh. He was one of the earliest social entrepreneurs, a social activist. In fact, there were only 3 IIMs in India. He got admitted to all the 3 IIMs in India. But, this is the kind of person he is. He chose to rather go to IRMA, Indian Rural Institute, Indian Institute of Rural Management, IRMA. And he rather chose to go there so that he would work among the rural poor. He did his master's in social work in Johns Hopkins. And he came to the Northeast to work among the rural poor in Assam. And he lived in a small island. And because the nature of our work is around bringing about social justice, there were times where he brushed wrongly against some of the contractors, some of the government officials who invariably had the blessings of some of the insurgent groups. And so he was in the red light. And just a week before he was kidnapped and later on killed, just a week before, I sat with him and we were having meal together. And Sanjoy Ghosh tells me, I was young then, and Sanjoy Ghosh tells me, Chingmak, I see that you're really struggling. You're looking for support. You're looking for recognition. But one of the things he told me was just keep on doing what you have to do. Just keep on doing what is the right thing to do. You just close your eyes and do what you have to do. And he said, a time will come when support will come looking for you. You don't have to look for support. You don't have to look for recognition. It's the other way around. You just have to do what you have to do. And it's very sad. That's how conflict did it. And conflict took away one of India's finest social activists. Friends, I'm here not primarily for any other thing. Not because of the talk we're having today. Sparsh told me that most of the attendants who would come for the talk show would be young students. And so I just came to meet you this morning here, and just to tell you that hard work, integrity, having genuine love, and all of these are ultimately what matters. Thank you.